Hi, baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer Sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade.
We chronicled the distinct memories of our childhood in our book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s, which takes you on a notably historic journey through that often forgotten decade. We also want to hear about your experiences during the 1950s. We will feature guests whose special stories of that decade will bring to mind magical moments of reflection, some with tears, some with smiles, but above all, a good dose of laughter.
We would like you to chat with us as we bring to mind the sights and sounds so familiar to that time in history. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house we go. Yeah, there it is, Jackie. Hi, friends and lovers of the 1950s Fun Chat, and those of you who are new to our channel, we're delighted you're here to join us. With this Fun Chat today is going to focus on our Thanksgiving memories. And Jackie, tell us about that book you're holding there.
This book is Over the River and Through the Wood by Lydia Marie Child, pictures by Britton Turkle, and it's been in my family for many, many years. I always read it to my children at Thanksgiving time, and I still continue that tradition by way of FaceTime.
All right. I don't recall having that book in our home, or even that story read, was it in our home?
I think maybe the story came to us from Mrs. Arntz, our elementary teacher, because we learned this song in school. Yes. And I kind of think Mom knew of it, though, because she would, I'm pretty sure she sang it as well.
Okay. Well, you know, the part that I think is interesting is that I can so vividly recall when Mrs. Arntz had one Thanksgiving this is now, folks, this is grades 1 through 4. That was Mrs. Arntz, Mrs. Violet Arntz was my elementary teacher, and Jackie had her ahead of that. But this Thanksgiving, if I recall correctly, we sang the song, and then she asked the students in the room, grades 1 through 4, if anyone had any special plans for Thanksgiving. Well, I was so proud of the fact that we were traveling to Grandma and Grandpa Weese's farm at Oaks, North Dakota. And I said, and it's over 200 miles from where we live. You made it a real production because I didn't think there were probably any other students in the classroom who were going to travel that far on Thanksgiving Day. And that is not like me. It was not like me even then as a child to gloat about something like that. But and I don't even remember Mrs. Arntz's response.
Yeah.
But it is, you know, some of those things that happened to us during our childhood in the 1950s, so imprinted right here, right? and viewers and when our audience, perhaps that was with you too. There are just special memories that you have of Thanksgiving Day of the 1950s. Maybe it was going over the river and through the woods to your grandmother's house, but maybe it wasn't. But Jackie, how do we go about going over the river and through the woods to Oaks, North Dakota to see Grandpa, Grandma Weeze?
Well, we just got in our car with I don't know how many hundreds of horses underneath the hood, but not just the one dapple gray that is told about in this song. And of course, we went through treacherous weather sometimes to get there.
It seemed like there was always the day started out well. It was frigid, always cold. And of course, Dad would have to get up very early in the morning and feed cattle and the sheep. And chickens, because they all had to be taken care of while we were gone that day. And more than likely, he probably gave them extra feed in the morning, knowing that we would be arriving home later in the evening. And maybe you remember, Jackie, that when we got home after those treacherous trips home, did he go out and do more feeding with the M and the farmhand? Did he take more hay out to them?
I cannot recall because I'm sure I just wanted to hit the hay, as Mom said.
No kidding.
Go to bed.
Yes. Well, I remember it was now 1957 green and white Buick. That was the big time car for me in the 50s decade. Although ahead of that, we did have a green Pontiac. I think Dad and Mom just really liked that color green. Don't you? We had so many green vehicles.
But then we had a blue Oldsmobile, a brown Oldsmobile. Anyway, moving on.
It had those little sparkles in the paint. Remember that? Yes. Okay. Well, back to Thanksgiving. Tell the viewers about what our normal Thanksgiving location was.
Our normal location was our aunt and uncle's ranch, Arrowhead Ranch, just south of Oaks, North Dakota. Their address is Hecla, and part of their ranch was in North Dakota and part was in South Dakota. And we would get up early in the morning and have curlers in our hair, and then about Verona, we'd take them out because we had slept in the curlers all night long. And then yes, it hurt. So then when we got there, I'll tell you one incident that I remembered, and it's indicated on our book here, page 203, if you want to read about this. Upon arrival at the ranch, I entered the kitchen and noticed that the big sink held a mound of potatoes. Little did I know that I was about to have an intimate relationship with that pile of spuds. The moms and we two oldest cousins, Colin, Treeby, and me, helped prepare the food for the family feast. Before we could head outside to mess around with the horses, Aunt Myrna informed us that those potatoes needed to be peeled. I calmly complied and began peeling, carefully moving the peeler toward me as I'd been taught. Colin grumbled and slowly made his way to the sink. That's where his sluggishness ended. When he started the task, it was evident that this was not his first time he performed this chore. He whipped off 4 slices to my 1, moving the peeler in rapid succession, flicking the peelings, moving toward the far end of the sink. I paused and looked in awe at his method, and I began to copy. Now, thanks to his lesson in how to peel potatoes efficiently, we were able to head outside more quickly. Even today, I continue to use the Colin method of peeling potatoes as I think of him when delving into this task.
I can just see him standing at the sink, grumbling about it, having to do that job. And I'm sure Myrna said if he didn't get over there, she probably said, Colin, get over there and peel those potatoes. Maybe that happened in the lives of any of our viewers too. Do you have to peel potatoes for your Thanksgiving meal, or was there some other responsibility? Did you have to set the table? Hey, let's talk about setting the table. What was that like? Do you recall? Or
I don't know. I don't know did we set the table or was it already set when we got there? Anyway, I was going to say you set the table with, of course, you had to make sure that the utensils were in alphabetical order. And what I mean by that is the fork is on the left, or 2 forks if you had a salad fork. Then you move, then the plate, and then the knife, and then the spoon. That's alphabetical order.
I did never know that you went by alphabetical order, left to right. Oh, I learned something today. Viewers, did you ever know that trick when setting flatware at the table? And you might say, well, I never did that. And what's the big deal? Just give me the fork and the knife and let's eat. But we also know that during those times, those special meals, whether it would have been away from home or even at our home, if we had our family in for a holiday meal, the table was always set with a linen tablecloth and with fine china. Mom had a beautiful set of china dishes, the beautiful flatware, sterling silver flatware, and linen napkins. It was
and the crystal, crystal,
crystal goblet, and of course we mom and dad made sure that we really had very good table manners. And that was reinforced even at Minokan School with our teachers when we sat at the table for even if we had hot lunch or if we even brought our lunch box. But that was courtesy, and it was going to be important to teach us that so that we could carry on as with our own families, and as we left the nest of the home and moved on to higher education, we had some training in how to be a proper guest at a table and how to eat nicely. What does that mean? How to eat nicely? What does that mean to you, Jackie?
I try to avoid the word nice because it's so ambiguous. It's just
okay.
Well, properly. With social graces.
There we go. And the conversation at the table usually was funny things that have been happening with our family members, or it might have been about the food. And of course, the food was passed from left to right. That was the direction in which every bowl should go. Dad never was a turkey carver at the table, though, was he?
Nope.
Mom would always carve that turkey in the kitchen and then bring it into our dining room area. And we could enjoy that. And of course, after we said grace. But do you recall, Jackie, what we had for our Thanksgiving meal?
Well, I can start you out on it. Of course, there was the bird, the turkey, the star of the show, and Mom's sage dressing. I still use that recipe, and it is a favorite around here.
Yeah.
And we had, of course, the gravy and the mashed potatoes, pickles, about probably 3 different kinds of pickles, sweet and dill and beet pickles, and then 2 different colors of olives, green and black.
Oh, that was a favorite of ours.
Yes, yes. Let's see. Sometimes we had gelatin salad. This was after all the 50s. What am I missing? Oh, sweet potatoes. Okay, sweet potato casserole, green bean casserole. What else was there? And pie, of course.
Oh yes, Mom's rolls. I think she always made the yeast rolls, the buns as she would call them, because usually when we were going on our trip to Arrowhead Ranch, the rolls and the pies would be in the back window of the back seat, and that would be the safest place for them until we got there. And then coming home, we were one of us was able to sleep, and that was usually you in the back window. How many folks are watching this who had that opportunity to sleep in the back window of their car? We weren't seatbelted then. It was just that was such a fun
thing. Yes, unsafe. I do remember, though, sleeping up there had a disadvantage because it was cold. The window was cold. So anyway,
we always had that wool blanket, that burgundy and blue plaid wool blanket that had the little fringy deals on the end.
Guess who still has that?
Oh, it's not me. It's not you. Do you use it?
It's in a lovely case with a zipper, and I do put it in the trunk of our car. Yeah.
Okay.
Just in case. I've never used it, but just in case.
Sure. Well, after we ate that marvelous meal at Treeby's, what did we do as kids to keep ourselves occupied?
Well, we headed for the barn, got the horses, and then we began playing tag. As quoted here from 207 on page 204. Okay. After a very filling noon meal with roasted turkey and all the trimmings, we cousins ventured out into the freezing temperatures for an afternoon game of tag. This was not the normal game of tag, but the tag played on horseback. After the horses were saddled, we cousins rode away to the haylot where the haystacks had been placed earlier in the year as winter cattle feed. Tall, wind-blown snowbanks made it difficult for our mounts to zigzag around the haystacks in order to outrun the team of a person and horse who was it. What great fun that was. It was wild, just wild.
It was. And did we have teams Or was it where just every man for himself?
I think can't recall really. It's
Okay.
but I just remember it was really fun because we were just
It was. Yes. And we did know how to ride horses. So it wasn't
yeah.
a big deal for that. And Treeby's always had some very gentle horses for us to ride. It was,
Although they go if you said let's go, let's kick it. Yeah. Well, yeah.
yeah.
It was quite fun. You know, that reminds me of another time, but I don't think we did that when we went to the Sandhills and played in the dark, which was, well, we would play tag in the Sandhills, but it was south and west of their place, east of their place. But the thing with that, yeah, maybe it was north. Anyway, the thing with that is that it was very dark and we'd be running on the Sandhills and could not see that right before us there was a sheer drop off. And I can remember the horse just stopped and turned away. And I think that horse saved my life because otherwise I would have fallen with the horse several feet just straight down.
Wow.
And, yeah, you don't remember that, huh?
Was it just you and Colin and Cam and me?
I don't remember. I just remember it was a thank you God moment when I didn't go over the cliff. Thanks to my horse.
Yes. Well, and Thanksgiving Day, of course, the hours are short. Daylight hours are short, and we needed to get home. And of course, the weather forecasting might not have been as serious or as thorough back in the 50s, but time after time after time, it would have been an unusual year if we didn't travel home in a snowstorm. It might not have started that way when we left Hecla, South Dakota, but as we got north and then started to go west on Highway 10, or then eventually when Interstate 94 came through, it was started to be pretty gall darn dangerous to be driving out there. And then not that we saw many cars, but we certainly couldn't see the road, or Dad couldn't see the road. So, what was Mom's capacity to gain us safety all the way home?
Well, go ahead. She would just put her head out the window and the snow would be blowing at her. And she'd be watching that line. And then she'd say, right or left, or no, go straight. You're doing fine. You're doing fine. And I think I can remember her doing that, but I was probably trying to sleep. But
more than likely we were wrapped up in that wool blanket.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say? Yes. But another thing that I recall her saying was that the painted lines on the outside edge of the highway were painted white. And she said, why does the DOT paint those lines white? Why don't they paint them yellow so we can see if we're staying on the road? And she'd get
fluorescent green.
Yes. She would get upset about that, and probably rightly so, for thinking of our safety in all that snow. And we would always get home. It was amazing. And of course Dad loved to drive fast, but he couldn't in the with that kind of road condition.
No.
But it was treacherous. And I've said to you, why do you suppose it was that we always made that trip at Thanksgiving, realizing that we were probably going to risk our lives going home in that snowstorm?
Well, you can tell us.
I think it's because Dad wanted Mom to be with her family. Yeah, we would go to the Oaks area, Hecla area, usually twice a year, on Memorial Day and on Thanksgiving. And, I think that was just the way that Mom could soak up her family again and maybe level out a little bit and just feel good about having seen her family and then moving on, because it was where we lived near Bismarck at Minokan. That was quite a distance from any of her relatives. And naturally, there wasn't a lot of traveling back then, not like there is now, where we just pick up and go and drive 90, 100, 200 miles. Like I said, in my elementary school, to over 200 miles. But it was something that we did then, and we loved doing it. And we're still here to tell about it, because But it was a fun time. One thing that was included in that, usually in the time that we were gathered as the Weiss family, was the time of movie camp. Movies would be taken, home movies, because Myrna had a movie camera, Uncle Cliff had a movie camera, or Uncle Ray had a movie camera, and so they all had to get footage of the family. And of course, the big thing then was there was no sound, and so we were supposed to, other than smile and look at the camera, we're all supposed to wave. Remember that? Just now wave, they tell us. But oh my goodness, those floodlights! Remember that bar of floodlights? Were there usually 4 of them, which were always used when they took indoor movies. Oh man! But anyway, that was
blinding. It was blinding.
Very much so, and that was a way to preserve the history of that time. Actually, I still do have a film, whatever, it's an 8mm film that was taken not so much from our Thanksgiving days, but from Uncle Ray filmed our wedding reception using that type of camera. So I still have that, and
I have ours as well. I know where it is, but what we need to do to really preserve it is to take it to some professional place and put it on a thumb drive, or
Yes, but exactly. Well, we've talked about Thanksgiving and the food that we had. You know what? Sometimes people had flubs when they made their food for Thanksgiving meals. Do you recall anything like that wasn't really tasty at our Thanksgiving meals?
I don't think so. That wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, I agree, because I think in those days, so many women really took a lot of pride in their homemaking skills and their cooking and baking abilities. And that was a time too when the Extension Service, if you were a homemaker's member, you might have had some training in special type of cooking or baking. So you had a huge opportunity day after day to practice those skills and make the food for your family turn out excellently. So I cannot remember anything specifically in our childhood where the food was a flop, you might say. No. Folks out there, do you recall a time? And if so, can you tell us about that? What food that was a flop for Thanksgiving? Oh, Jackie, we should talk about when Mom and Dad would raise geese and ducks. And then that's one thing. Dad was a peddler. Not only did he peddle eggs every Friday to customers in Bismarck, but some of these same egg customers then would pre-order a Thanksgiving or a Christmas goose or duck.
Or turkey.
Did we raise turkeys?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't remember that so much. I just remember the duck and the goose because they weren't my favorite meats to eat, although Mom would usually make them for
Christmas goose.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And she might have made a duck for Thanksgiving along with the turkey too, depending, because Dad really liked duck and goose, but I always liked white meat versus dark meat, and so that kind of fowl was not my favorite meat to eat.
It was fowl, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so Mom and Dad would process those at home, those birds at home. And of course, we didn't have refrigeration for all of those birds. So that night, and it was usually the eve of Thanksgiving, or it must have been Christmas Eve day, that Dad would have delivered those birds to families just awaiting their star-studded, center of the table bird to be on display then after cooking it the next day for the holiday. And it was very special for those folks who purchased that fresh fowl from us, and it was special for Dad too to have raised those. I'd say probably most of the responsibility for raising them was from Mom, though. She probably did the feeding and the whatever, and of course she did so much of the work when it came to actually Dad and Mom worked as a team to get that whole processing thing done. But it was an act of love, but it also brought money into our coffers so that we could buy groceries, and they could buy those piano and dance lessons for us, and all that was extra money that really helped with our farm income. Well, we talked you talked about having our hair in rollers, when we would travel. What was that like for you?
Well, at the beginning, and I still have these, they were metal rollers, and I think they were left over from Mom in the 40s.
Oh, really?
Yes. So we would sleep on those, and your head would ache in the morning. And then,
I remember them. They had like a little rubber thing that went over and held them close to your head. All right. Yeah. Real
and then the wonderful invention of those pink, which I still have, pink rollers they were just much more comfortable. Yeah.
The sponge. Well, when did brush rollers come into play?
Oh, that was later, but they would hurt too.
Oh, they certainly did. That's what I remember more was a brush roller. Oh, good Lord. And the picks that had to hold them in, and would have to figure out a certain way to lie with your head so that you weren't stabbed all night in the head by those brush rollers. Ugh.
Yeah.
But usually we would have had a Tony home perm to start with. And then after our hair was washed and set, then it was much more manageable versus just having a wash and going frizz.
Now, any of you viewers who are watching, did you have a Tony home perm or a lilt home perm? And what is your reaction? Did you love them or not?
Didn't the smell was awful. Why would they? Jeepers creepers. But I don't know. Are home perms still available? Have any idea on that one?
Maybe somebody can answer that.
Yes.
It wouldn't be we would not be indulging in a home perm.
That's right. I'm thankful for the blow dryer and a curling iron if necessary on that. Well, Thanksgiving was a very, very special day. And of course, we were out of school that day. We were out of school on Friday, the next day. So it was a little vacation to be at home. I don't recall. There certainly wasn't anything like, what's it called? Friday? What?
Oh, Black Friday?
Yes, there certainly wasn't anything as Black Friday then. But maybe at that time, maybe on Friday, after we had helped Dad with chores in the morning, and maybe we just stayed lying on the floor of the living room with our feet next to the vent where heat came out from the furnace, and looking at the wish book and thinking that what can we get for Christmas? And maybe some of you enjoyed looking at wish books too and made lists. I don't remember necessarily going through that catalog. The Sears or the Montgomery Ward's catalog is what I recall when we were children, and making a list. But I do remember looking through the pages. I didn't think it would necessarily. I don't ever remember making a Christmas list. Do you on that?
No, but I think maybe we marked the pages.
Oh, could be.
Somehow. Yeah, we put a marker in there. Yeah, I mean, how else could Santa Claus know what we wanted if we didn't mark it?
Very true. That's very true. And did we ever write letters to Santa?
I think so, yes. I don't know if it was a real... Well, we're kind of skipping into the next holiday here.
This is pre-Christmas. You kind of get warmed up after Thanksgiving for the next holiday.
Yes, and somewhere in that time, probably the next week, we would buy a real live tree. Okay, better stop there in Bismarck.
Yes. In that era, I don't remember even the opportunity to have purchased an imitation green tree. Now there came what I remember as far as what would have been an really outside the box Christmas tree were the silver ones.
Exactly.
The aluminum.
Yes. And then they have the different colored floodlights that would pass over the aluminum. That was more 60s, I believe.
Okay. Well, it was cool. And you know what? I actually ordered one of those off of Etsy. And I have it. I put it up a couple of different years, but the strobe light that came with it was not big enough to
Oh,
really floodlight the whole tree and make it change colors. But it's cool. And I don't decorate much for Christmas anymore because
well,
I don't.
I know. Okay. All right. Well, anything else then for Thanksgiving then that we need to touch on?
I'm not thinking so right now. It was a very fun time for us, a warm time because we were with family, and not
Mm-hmm.
only with mom and dad, but we were with extended family, and
Mm-hmm.
it made the holiday very memorable to
Mm-hmm.
me, at least because of that. And of course, all these stories that we have shared now about that time, those times of those Thanksgiving times.
And then the history of Thanksgiving was really brought out at school. We, we did. We focused on that. So before we leave here, though, I want to make sure that our viewers look at the bottom of that screen and notice www.whilethewindmillwatched.com. Please go to our website and you'll find all sorts of information about the authors, the book, While the Windmill Watched, the vendors, and the 1950s Fun Chat.
Mhm.
So also on this screen, as you're perusing up in the right-hand corner, there is a photo of the book. And you'll see a little white spot down there. Well, that indicates that a very special award because it is called the 2022 Independent Press Award for Nonfiction, and it won the Distinguished Favorite in that category. So we're very pleased to have that medallion on the book in front of our cover.
Yes, yes. And that book, While the Wind that book, our book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s, tells so many more stories in addition to what we shared today about Thanksgiving and our memories of that decade. That's what makes that book so attractive to people who lived in the 50s because they tell us that they can identify with what we live, how we lived and what we lived through in that time. And of course, everyone's story is unique. That's why we love telling those stories on the 1950s Fun Chat. And so next week, you will hear from another guest who will share their memories of that decade. And we're so thankful that you tune in all the time. It's wonderful. It's a blessing. And if you've missed some of those earlier ones from 60 weeks ago when we first started 60 plus weeks ago, go on to our website, and all of those fun chats are recorded there. And actually they're on YouTube too. So we give you so many opportunities to remember the 1950s. And you know what, Jackie, I want to add this too, that sometimes when we talk to our guests or ask potential guests to be involved, they'll say, well, I can't remember anything from the 50s. And so then that it's like we plant a seed in their mind and they say, oh, they start thinking. They said the wheels start turning in their minds. And then all of a sudden they'll say, yes, I've got something to talk about on the Fun Chat. Well, if that is you out there, our dear audience, we would love to hear from you. Put a comment down below if you'd like to be on our Fun Chat, or if you know someone who would have a very interesting story from the 1950s. Until then.
Well, wait a minute. I have a PS to add.
Okay.
Many people might be able to identify it, but with our book. However, the 1950s were so different for all of us. Some of you might say, well, that didn't happen in my family, or I was raised in the city and I didn't have those experiences. Well, as Janine mentioned, that's your story, is your unique story. We don't expect that guests will all have had the type of life that we had. So we want to hear about those as well. Mm-hmm. Also now, back to the screen, look at the red button, the subscribe button. So please touch that. And then also there's a thumbs up button. So we'd be really happy if you would acknowledge this show.
And thank you for watching today. Jackie and I have had a ball telling you about our Thanksgiving experiences in the 1950s. And may you all have a very richly blessed Thanksgiving Day. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.